Hi, my name is Jo Willems. I'm the cinematographer on Finch, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we speak with Jo Willems, Director of Photography of Finch on Apple TV+. Jo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I just finished watching the film today. I really, really enjoyed it, and I know all of you guys listening and watching will absolutely love it as well. And there's so much to get to. Before we get there, I just want to very quickly mention MZ Empowering Filmmakers. MZ is our sponsor for this episode. And I also want to encourage you to follow us on your favorite podcast app, including Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. So, I think when I was watching the film this morning, what struck me the most is it's a sci-fi film, but you don't really know it is. Like it doesn't feel like a science fiction film, but it very much is. Can you just kind of get us up to speed for the people that may not know what the film is? Just a little bit of background on what is the story, what is going on, and then we'll talk about the visual style that you employed for it and why. So first things first, what is Finch?
Finch is really a story about a scientist who lives in the apocalypse. It's the end of the world. It looks like he is the last character on the planet. And he is sort of rummaging around, these towns that have no people living in them. And he has a dog that he takes care of. And he is building this robot to take care of the dog. And at one point, a storm comes in. They have to get out of this bunker because they will have no food to go for. And they decide to leave for better places. And that's kind of the story. It's a father-son relationship that starts to build. And the son is a robot. And the father is played by Tom Hanks.
And the robot that he's building needs to take care of his dog because he has an ailment that we don't totally get. It doesn't totally get revealed in the film what's going on, but we know that he has a health problem and won't be around for a long time and loves this dog and wants to take care of the dog. So it's a very personal, very intimate, almost kind of a very small story, but set in a world that is post-apocalyptic. Like it really could be this giant epic sci-fi film, but it is very much not. It's almost like this story could be told in any sort of small environment. It doesn't, the fact that it's happening in a post-apocalyptic world is almost like an aside to the story. It really has nothing to do with the story.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a really interesting approach.
That's why also I get a little bit, I read some of the reviews as you do, and there's people that sort of focus on, the minutia of like, can he really live in this suit? Can he really be outside? It's radiation. It's like, it's not about that. It's really, to me, what spoke to me is this story, this very human story. And that we always talked about, it's like a very large movie, but it's kind of tiny. It's really about three people. And that was also my intention to keep it as a small movie. I didn't have to I just wanted to, with the cinematography, I just wanted to stand back a little bit. And I still needed to draw the audience in, but I felt like I'm just recording this little sort of family movie. That's how we looked at it. It's a little family movie about life. That's it.
And we've seen Tom Hanks in, I don't even know if I could call it a similar role, but in Castaway, he's, again, it's his show. He is the movie, and he kind of has these inanimate objects that are his world. Yeah. And he sort of creates a world where there's no humans around. And we've sort of seen him in this environment a little bit. Finch is certainly a different story completely, but I bring it up because you have obviously A-list, like the upper echelon of acting talent in our world, certainly Tom Hanks. And he's going to give you amazing performances for sure. But when you come into a story like this, where it's basically him the whole time, does that change the way you think about the cinematography? Because you now have to film this one character for 2 hours with no other humans and keep it engaging, keep it interesting, even with somebody like Tom.
Yeah.
Do you worry about that as a cinematographer?
I mean, there was two things that I worried about. One, that, you know, the robot wouldn't integrate, because if the robot doesn't work, the movie falls apart. And the other thing that I wanted to do was Tom needs to be, or Finch, relatable. You need to like him as a character, because he is an older man. He can come across as a little bit grumpy, you know, and he can be, you know, like with his son, he can be quite fatherly. So those were the two things that I wanted to make sure that I created intimacy with Tom. And I think just with lensing it, or the way we framed it and the way we always looked for that intimacy, I think is what, you know, made us relate to Tom.
Well, talk to me about that. How do you create kind of an intimate, you know, framing, or an intimate sort of look in cinematography? What does that even mean, and how do you achieve it?
Well, first of all, I think you have to try and stay away from artifice, right? So you got this big adventure movie, and you could go all sorts of directions with that look. You could go, you know, glossy. You could go like as sharp with the lenses as you can. You can, like, you know, but we decided to shoot it mostly handheld, and we decided to stick with the story. Just stay with the story. Stay with Tom. Just stay with him. And, like, you know, and if there's big moments, just be right there with him. If you look at the scene that's in the RV towards the end, you know, you just get right in there. You know, the hugs with the robot when he's saying goodbye. You just, like, you go in there with the handheld. You just slowly push in, and you just create that intimacy. There's no big fanfare. There's no big sort of way of, you know, or trying to push emotion on an audience. You know, it's just you have to slowly and gently give them this person.
So you going in closer with wider lenses is
That's correct.
What I was seeing when I was watching.
That's right.
And that gives you that intimacy.
Yeah.
Now, it certainly works. I mean, it's great in the film. It looks awesome. And it's a great technique to sort of make you feel like you're very much in the scene. But I also think a lot of the film is almost voyeuristic in a way. It's certainly at the beginning of the film, when you're in the, I guess, the bunker. I don't know what else to call it. It's kind of like where he lives.
The underground bunker.
Yeah, the bunker. Yeah. It felt very much like you were kind of peering in on this man in his natural environment, and just kind of just watching him do what he does. Which to me is almost like the total opposite approach, being further away, longer lenses.
It's also observational, you know, it's like you observe this character. I mean, you can go from subjective to objective sort of, you know, camera movement or language in this kind of movie. And it was funny, one of the first days we shot in this bunker, and we decided actually not to shoot all that handheld. It was more like, okay, let's establish this character. And the lighting of it, same thing. I just let him move in this space. And I remember at one point somebody coming over to me, and it was day one, saying like, hey, yo, you know, it's a little dark. I can't see Tom. You know, he's sort of in that thing by the fridge, and I can't see him. I said, you'll see him later, I promise. You know, I want to, like, hold that back a little bit. You'll see him later. It's fine. Sometimes you just have to convince people of, like, that, you know, the arc you're going to create with a character, rather than, no, I need to see Tom. Like, I need every single moment I need to put this light on him. No, let him exist in this space. And that's naturalism. You know, that's like cinematic naturalism. It's not really documentary style, but it's definitely, you know, something that's, you try and keep the movie out of it. Even though it's cinematic, I mean, you're using anamorphic lenses, using all sorts of stuff. That it's really just to be, just stand back, just let it be, you know.
Who was telling you it's too dark? I mean, obviously, don't name names.
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
No, it was a producer. It was a producer. Yeah.
See, that to me sounds like almost like a network note.
Yeah.
Like, you know, someone that's thinking, listen, we paid all this money for this guy. I want to see him. I
Yeah.
want to make sure I see his face.
Yeah.
It sounds like one of those things. It doesn't sound like it's coming from necessarily a creative place.
No, no.
It's more coming from
like
a
fear
money place.
Like, oh, you know, I'm here to sort of, you know, I got to protect this project. But I think tone of a film and emotion you get from a film is from those things. You know, it's like, let those people exist in a real place. Otherwise, you go back to like movies in the 50s that, you know, every single place or person had like a little spotlight on them. And I don't think that's, you know, that's audiences aren't, you know, they're maybe not smarter, but, you know, just things have evolved and what we can do with cameras as well and lighting. I mean, those days people were shooting on 50 ASA film stock. That's not the case anymore.
Exactly. You needed the sun to light anything back in those days.
That's right.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about that bunker scene. And just to bring people up to speed, this is where Finch basically lives. It's protected from the outside world. So it appears as though it's underground is sort of the feeling that I'm getting from it. And it's that very feeling that I wanted to talk to you about, because how do you approach an environment that is supposed to feel isolated? It's supposed to feel underground. You don't have the benefits of windows, but you also have to light it in a way that feels homey. Yeah. It's an unusual sort of mix. Yeah. It has to feel and look like a home, but it very much isn't, particularly because of having no windows and being isolated. So talk to me about the way that you lit that bunker scene to give it that feel and make it work within the character's world.
Well, there was two different parts to the bunker. There was his living quarter, which I just lit with practicals. You know, I never used any movie lights. I just let it. I mean, movie lights. I mean, I used Astera tubes and I used light bulbs and sort of mixed color temperature a little bit. But it, like you say, it needed to feel homely. It couldn't be this constant, you know, it needed to be like a womb, you know, and not that we made it warm or we made it, but it had to have a fuzziness to it. You know, he came in and he saw the dog and he hugs the dog, and it needs to feel inviting rather than this bunker that's kind of like, all right, this is really the end of the world. Because the movie plays in the end of the world, but just like we are in this pandemic, we have come to accept certain things that are now normal and that we live through. And it's not like we're not lying in bed like with the covers over us for, you know, 24 hours a day. We live our lives. And that's what Tom does. He goes out there and he tries to have a positive attitude towards, well, the end of the world. And so the inside needed to feel that way. And we just used practicals and made sure that it wasn't overlit. There's like pockets of light, and it's somewhere where you want to sit down and he wants to have a little whiskey and he wants to, you know, to enjoy himself. Then the other section was the sort of the science lab where he's building the robot. I needed contrast in there to kind of keep it, because also he's lighting this thing with windmills, you know, power that is generating himself, batteries. I couldn't sort of make it like an overlit sort of environment. It always wanted to have pockets of light, like little pockets of light around his desk, and it wanted to feel like, and it was funny when we were shooting it, there was moments where it was like, I looked at it and it was like, it sort of looks like a Spielberg movie from like, you know, and so that has a little bit of that warmth to it, and it felt a little bit like an old movie. And I kind of enjoyed that it didn't necessarily feel very modern either, but it felt warm and it felt a nice spot to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. It does have a little bit of that 80s Spielberg movie-ish feel. And I think what was giving that to me was the color palette. It sort of had, there was a lot of warmth and a lot of color in there. Yeah. Also, even just like the set design and stuff. Like it wasn't, you didn't know. Did the world end in 1992? I don't know. Did it end in 2040? You don't know. Yeah. And it's like everything is kind of old and dusty, but at the same time not ancient. Like the whole thing kind of feels, like you said, it's a sci-fi movie that is very, very grounded. Yeah. And it's an unusual mix. You had mentioned earlier in some of the reviews that you were reading, are you Are you the type of person that always likes to look at the reviews of the films you work on?
I mean, I look at some of them for sure. I read some of that stuff, and you want to sort of. It's probably a wrong thing. I don't know, but I do. I don't read all of them, but I do sort of. I felt with this bunch of reviews that were sort of on the negative side, some of them, I felt like they were, like I said, it's like, who cares? Like, if this RV it can really, like, where does it get the fuel? Well, it's solar powered. It's like, and it doesn't go into like, okay, the suit, it is. And I think an audience has to accept that kind of stuff. Like, just sit down. Don't be sitting there watching a movie and like analyzing every single beat, and just enjoy this kind of movie. Just like let these people, it's quite reflective, or where you think it's introspective. It's you think about life. I mean, I have kids, you have parents, it's a little bit like, these things make you think about life. Now they're not but it also, it doesn't go too heavy either. Some of those sci-fi movies, and I love some of them, but they go to a very dark place. And this movie didn't go there. Like I said, it's like an acceptance of the end of the world. And they sort of, the two characters start to have this, we live in the present day as the characters. They live their day-to-day life, and the robot starts to have its own feelings or its own thoughts about life. But then they have this sort of joint horizon. They have this thing that they want to, they obviously, they want to go to a better future, or something that is better. So that's the Golden Gate Bridge. They want to, and that's kind of like very human. We all have our Golden Gate Bridge. We all have relationships and the day-to-day stuff, and then you have the stuff that's in the future. And I think that's what makes this film relatable and beautiful.
Did you have any visual references that you and the director were looking at prior to?
It's funny. I used to come to a movie before I read the script. I wouldn't even be in prep, and I would have a pretty solid idea of what I wanted it to look. And then I don't know, over the last few years, I kind of have sort of relaxed a little bit, maybe. And I kind of, I go and hang out in the art department, and I look at their pictures on the wall, and I go to the costume department, and like, oh, can I see the outfits, and I can see the clothes, and obviously the locations, and so the look sort of develops from that, rather than, I mean, the references. There was one thing that I showed Miguel, and he keeps mentioning this, and I can't. There was a music video by Jamie XX that's shot in China. It's for, I think it's Oh My Gosh, or I think that's the title of it. And he was like, yeah, that's it. That's kind of like a cool sort of dusty. It needed to be dusty. It needed to feel hot. It needed to feel... That was kind of the only thing. I mean, you look at references of like, all of these movies, but I didn't really bring anything that was particularly specific from another project or another piece of art or another, I kind of let it sort of, all our work is, I mean, the work is quite intuitive, instinctive, what we do. It's, so it's
I'm looking up as you're talking. I'm looking up the Gosh video.
Yeah,
and
it was more of a color thing, I think, maybe that he was relating to.
Yeah,
because I never looked at that again. It was like in prep, and it was like, yeah.
I can see some similarities there, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes, guys, so you can check it out. One thing I noticed is, everyone in the world just saw Dune, right?
Yeah.
They have an idea of what a desert setting is. You now come to the table with a new interpretation of the desert.
Yeah.
And the film opens with a big giant, it's not really the desert, but it's I guess deserted over, if that's a word, but he lives in St. Louis, right?
Yeah, St. Louis.
That's where Finch lived. So he's in St. Louis. It's post-apocalyptic. Everything's dry. There's sand everywhere. Clearly, there's big sand and windstorms all the time. That's how the film begins, with kind of this chaos of sand and wind going all over the place. Can you talk to me about the practical challenges of shooting in an environment like that, where there is artifacts in the air. There's sand whipping in your face. There's big giant windstorms going on. And you made the decision to be handheld. So there's quite a few logistical problems that I'm sure you had to deal with in that opening scene.
I mean, we ended up having to hire somebody that would come in at night to clean everything out. And you can see some of the shots, particularly when Finch walks from his truck to his bunker, where the sound sort of goes down. You don't hear anything. It's just like this kind of almost like a slow-mo helicopter sound that he just sort of drags in. And Dave Thompson, the camera operator, he was in there with him. I mean, it was completely, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, and the amount of wind machines and the amount of dust and sand, but it was fantastic the way. And then, shooting the handheld was so much fun. I mean, it was tricky because the cameras had to, they were all wrapped up and packed up, and the cleaning and the glass, but it all added to this. It felt so real. And the glass, just, you could see it. There's like a bit of backlight on it, and you see it's just full of dust and and I think, we kept, it was definitely challenging.
So that was all practical.
It was a lot of practical dust.
Well, not all, but
not all, but we definitely had large wind machines, large particles flying through the air. It was.
How are you protecting the camera during that? I mean, how are you are your operators like wearing protective suits?
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't.
What are you doing?
It's full full masks, the I don't even know if he had, but it was definitely it's full mask, full visor. The camera's completely wrapped up, and then he's in there handheld. And then his and he would, I mean, at the end of the day, he would just be beat, would just be beat up because it was hot. It was in Albuquerque. It was something else, but fun. And I love the way that material looks. I love the way it has a beaten up feel to it. Everything it's like you've gone on the film or on the project with sandpaper, and you've taken all the gloss off. And that to me is again, it's feeding into the idea of creating this world that you take the audience into.
It's such a great opening scene. Yeah. I love just the whole sequence from when you first establish where he is. You don't know who the character is. I mean, it's a Tom Hanks movie, obviously going into it. Yeah. But if for some reason you didn't know that, there's a little bit of mystery to who is this man. Yeah. And then it sort of it unfolds as you go into his home environment. It's just a great, great sequence. Yeah. And you almost think to yourself, you think you know what the movie's about. Over the course of the first half hour, you sort of realize, that's not really what the movie's about. It keeps kind of changing until you actually get to the storyline. Let's take a quick moment and talk about MZ empowering filmmakers. Now, you want to think of MZ as the hub of filmmaking education. When you go to MZ, you are faced with hundreds and hundreds of hours of high quality, video-based filmmaking education in all the topics that are perfect for us here at Go Creative Show. Things like directing, cinematography, post-production, visual storytelling, and so much more. And it's not just the courses, it's not just the topics, it's also the educators. Because we're talking about people at the top of their game, working in the industry right now, sharing their experiences with you. People like Vincent LaFerre, Shane Hurlbut, Philip Bloom, Tom Cross, the editor of La La Land and No Time to Die, Whiplash, all sorts of things. It's just full of really A-list, people in the industry educating you and giving you a little bit of their insights and experiences. It's incredible what you can get at MZ. Now, there's two ways to experience MZ. One, of course, is buying individual courses. And that's a great way to do it, certainly. But the way to really experience what MZ is all about is becoming an MZ Pro member. Because when you're an MZ Pro member, you have access to everything on the site. So it's great for if there's a topic you're into a little bit, like you want to dabble in color grading. You don't necessarily want to buy a whole course in it, but you want to kind of just experience it, maybe a couple lessons. An MZ Pro membership is perfect because you could just kind of explore all these different topics. And it's a great way to learn. Now, anything you buy, you can get a 20% off discount by using GCS20 in your promo code area in checkout, GCS20 for 20% off. And the place to do it at, the place to go to, I guess is the better way to say it, is gocreativeshow.com/MZ, MZED, MZ, empowering filmmakers. Let's talk about the camera package that you used for Finch. I want to know about the cameras, the lenses,
Sure.
the choices you made, and why.
Again, I wanted to shoot anamorphic. 2 reasons. One, the landscape, particularly when we get out into the world. You want to see that large landscape. You want to see the horizon. You want to see, you've been in this bunker for a while. You want to see the horizon. You want to see that widescreen image. So that was reason 1. And then 2, I wanted to put more artifacts on the lens to integrate the robot so that VFX had a harder time doing it. Of course, I mean, we discussed this all, but it makes it harder. They have to put those bends, they have to put those flares, they put all of this on top of the character. And it integrates much better that way. If you shot this on the cleanest spherical lens that you could, it would all start to feel a little bit sterile. So again, it's like taking the the sandpaper to it. And we shot Mini LF, and then Dan Sasaki rebuilt these T-series lenses to fit a 4K width of the sensor. This was a Miguel thing. He was like, no, I want to shoot large format. I want to and so I went to Dan and I said, hey, I know you got these lenses, but then he didn't have them because Greg had all of them on Dune. So then
goddamn Greg, taking
Greg,
everybody's equipment.
And so I was like, but he said, I've got this other thing. He said, I'm working on this thing. And it's like, do you want to check it out? And I said, sure. So we had like 3-4 lenses that were done. It was T-series, expanded to a 1.8 squeeze. I looked at them. We stood in the car park at Panavision and we did a little bit of testing. Of course, testing is always different from you're in the field and you're doing it. Pretty much when we were loading the camera truck, well, the guys were loading the camera truck, they ran in with the last lens and it was finished, So I hadn't really used the lenses all that much. So I was really discovering them and discovering some of the artifacts that I was like, oh man, I don't know, is this okay? Like, as you can see in the movie, there's a lot of vignetting, there's like bits of lens coming in. And I said to Miguel, we can get rid of some of that stuff. He said, no, I love it. Just keep that all in there. Because it all adds to just texture and layers and so we had a couple zoom lenses because we did a few crane shots and some pursuit work, and so we had a 37.5 to I think it's 85, also an expanded lens. We had a 70 to 200. I think that was kind of it. We did some drone work, which I used to do drone work with the big choppers and then or the big the heavy lifter thing, and now I've sort of gone a little bit more, well, there's these 6K cameras, they can fly, they just go out there and just go. You don't need a full big crew to man it. And Ian Seabrook did the second unit. He was actually the B cam operator, and he's done some second unit for me as well. And he just went out there and shot a bunch of RV stuff driving, and he used some drone work there.
Can you talk to me about any filtration that you used? Did you toss any filters on those lenses?
No filtration. I mean, the only thing would be NDs. I don't think, sometimes I'm like, oh, hey, I call up my first AC and I say, I want to test some diffusion out. And then I go through the motion and I'm like, I can't stand it. Like, I can't do it. It's just like, to me, it adds.
Why do you hate it?
It just adds artifice to me. It's not real. It's not like I want to keep things, I don't know, it takes me out of the world of like, because you're trying to hide something or you're trying to do something. And listen, I've seen projects that have used it. They use this diffusion filter on, what's the TV show with Cillian Murphy?
Oh God. Oh, it's on the tip of my
Peaky
tongue.
Blinders. Peaky Blinders.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Peaky Blinders. And they use this filter, and I'm like, all right, let me test this thing. And it looks great in that show. And then I'm like, I can't do it. Just can't do it. Can't go there. I want to, I don't know. It's not like a purity thing, or it's not like but every time, also it doesn't work in all situations. Like, oh, now I'm shooting outside, sun hitting this filter, and oh, it's a mess, I prefer doing things with lighting, or also I don't mind things. I mean, you can see it in the movie. It's not all, because people have told me like, oh, the movie is so beautiful. And sometimes that sort of irks me a little bit, because it's not all beautiful. Sometimes it's a bit gritty. It's a bit dirty. It's not perfect. It's a little flawed. I'm not looking for, oh, I need to light Tom every time in the perfect way. It's perfect for the movie, according to me. Not all of it, because I mean, it's never fully perfect, a movie. I call them nails in my coffin. There's these shots that you just can't get it.
Like what? Point to one. We'd love to.
Well, there's a sequence that was probably the hardest for me to shoot, which was the chase sequence. They're followed by a car, and we started the sequence in dusk, and then it goes into night, and then it goes into, which we had to do day for night in color timing. And then it goes into real night, because we had to shoot real night, because we need to, and then a lot of that sequence is also shot on stage. We had some technical difficulties with the RV, and at one point it was like, all right, we got to shoot more of the RV. It started overheating. So we needed to shoot more stuff on stage. So we ended up shooting a lot of that RV footage on stage. And that sequence we were supposed to shoot it in Toronto, the overpass. We scouted Toronto, and then we scouted Denver. And in the end, we ended up shooting it 5 minutes from where we lived in Albuquerque under this underpass. It was a very difficult location. There was going to be moments that there was going to be flat lighting or frontal lighting, and those things are, they're just a compromise. But
yeah,
I think every movie has that. Although I watched Dune and I was like, wow, man, there's not a shot here that doesn't. It's so consistently good, I told Greg that. I said, like, it's incredible how it's so, it just looked great, like every single shot. I don't see a beat that you missed. There's always I always have some shots in my movies where I'm like, oh man, I wish that wasn't in there.
But they probably just bother you, and
probably.
no one else even notices those.
Yeah, probably.
So that's interesting. So you shot portions of the RV stuff within an actual RV, and then it just became problematic. You ended up rebuilding it on a set.
Well, we always shot on the actual RV, which sort of brings me to we always knew there was going to be some stuff shot on stage in the RV. It just for timing but some stuff was shot for real. And then we'd have the biscuit or the pod that would be either on top of the RV or in front of the RV, and then it would get painted out because Tom couldn't drive the thing.
Sure.
Or the robot couldn't drive the thing. I mean, the robot would be driving, the driving lesson. That's, we did that on actual location. We rigged cameras off the side and we shot it as if it was a car shoot. But some of it was shot, particularly when the RV was static. A lot of that was shot on stage. The confession, all of that stuff was shot on stage. But then the trust scene, we took the windows out, put 3 cameras in, and shot it on stage.
Oh, wow.
Tell me your question again, because I feel like I've sort of wandered off.
No, we did wander off. I don't even remember what my original question was, but it's fine.
Yeah.
I liked where we went, so we're good. But what I do want to talk about is working with that robot, because, basically Tom Hanks' co-star is a robot. Yeah. And I was reading about it. It was mostly motion capture. Yeah. So there is an actual being in the space that Tom can interact with. Yeah. But I don't think we ever really talked about motion capture on this show, at least in depth. And I'm just curious from a director of photography's perspective, what are the challenges, or how do you properly film a character in an emotion capture suit?
I mean, funny enough, for me, it was really easy because we decided early on that the method of shooting handheld was going to be the method, and that they would shoot plates, they would shoot motion capture. There was some cameras that were pointing at, Caleb, who had the dots on, and he would do his performance. There was a couple things he couldn't do, like walk in front of Tom, because then, even though there is a couple shots where it's done, but we had no green screens because of the robot. We had some other green screens, but not because of the robot. We just had the actor do his performance. And Miguel would for him, it was really important. We would do 5, 10, 12 takes sometimes. And I'd be like, Miguel, I got to shoot. The sun's going down. There was the scene where he was sitting in the RV while Tom is inside. And it was on this beautiful landscape. I said, Tom, Miguel, the sun is dropping. He says, yeah, but I need the performance. And I was like, yeah, no, you're right. Because how can you otherwise? It's impossible to cut a movie like that without, let's just say you put a stand in there that's just kind of standing and reading lines, or you put nobody there. First of all, it's very difficult to act. Second, it's very difficult to, where's the camera going to go? And how do you relate to that? And so it needed to, because how do you draw these characters in post if, they become stick figures? So Caleb really gave the character life. I mean, it's super fun to do it that way.
That must have been a blast.
Yeah.
Now, do you have something on set that you're reviewing what, the final look may be? Like, do a lot of people are incorporating Unreal Engine onto their sets and kind of, do you have something like that so you can see a little bit more of the texture?
No, nothing.
So
you got this guy a guy in a weird suit. We got him to the right height, so he's walking on stilts. The only thing that was kept was the hands, because the hands, so he fit these gloves on, Caleb did, because, he's touching stuff and he's shaking his hand, and, that was the only thing. I think sometimes maybe his feet were kept, because then the rest was replaced. We would shoot. We would clear everybody out, and they would shoot empty plates so that they can fill in where the robot was missing. But I must say that the robot, because, we shot this movie 3 years ago, and maybe not 3, 2 and a bit. And I think the robot looks amazing. I mean,
it's incredible.
It's the motion
really
and everything, and the way it's just everything. I think it's amazing.
It's so fluid. And the other thing about the robot is, over the course of the film, it becomes more human-like in its speaking and its motion as well. So it starts very robotic, like the way we all sort of interpret what robots look like. And over time becomes very much just another human character in the space. So there is a lot to the performance and the physicality of that character. I have a question about the plates. So you're shooting handheld. So how are you getting accurate plates? I mean, I'm sure visual effects people listening are probably like, that's the dumbest question ever. But I truly am mesmerized by this. If you're shooting handheld, there's no real consistency from shot to shot. So how are you getting realistic plates that can be used? You
just, you have the operator repeat what he did. And then he would sometimes he would do static plates where he would just roam around and build a bit of a world. So it'd be like, okay, 3 seconds here, 3 seconds there, and just move around. So he would have the whole world. And then sometimes he would do the whole motion of that's skill, that's experience, and they then, I'm sure they did stills as well. They do the HDR, they do with the super wide lens on there, and they start doing, stills, and they use that as well. They do the silver balls, they do the color chart, they do... Yeah. But they let us be free, which I think was, rather than, people think, oh, we got to do this motion control, or you're going to do it as lock off, so you're going to do it as... No, they just said, okay, we buy into this. It's going to take time. It's going to be painful at times. For example, the shot that apparently it took a year to finish it is the hug between Finch and Jeff in the desert.
It took a year?
Yeah. Because just imagine the actors are doing this hug, right? So you got Caleb's head that's against Tom's face. Tom is not acting against air. So whatever Caleb did, the robot had to do. If anything sort of moved, it was that you'd have to put a little cable or a screw that hit, like Tom's beard, or go and look at it and you'll see it. It's like, it all looks very natural, but that took a while. And that's to Scott, who was the VFX supervisor, to just stick to it and to really to build that robot. And for the audience, I love the way some of the reviews were kind of negative about the robot. I'm like, well, that kind of I think we made it work, because you think that this robot is good. He's just not saying the right things. You didn't say that the robot didn't look real,
What were the negative comments about the robot? I actually read pretty positive comments.
Oh no,
on
listen,
the film.
I've read mostly positive reviews as well. I don't want to like suddenly feel like as if there was a.
But it's the negative ones that stick with you and probably annoy you.
Yeah. That's the ones.
Of course,
like,
100 positive ones and one negative. You're like, exactly. Damn it! I could have got that 100th person. All right, so I want to dive a little bit more into the way that you light this robot, because, like you said, it's an actor in motion capture suit. Is that even the right term? I don't know if I'm saying the right thing.
I think, but you're correct.
Okay,
yeah.
So you've got an actor wearing this suit. Your height is correct. You've got the hands, the gloved hands that are practical, and sometimes the feet, like you mentioned. I think I also saw like shoulder pads or something. There was some of the arm was there.
Also, he had the mask on. He had like the mask. He could see through the mask, and so his face wasn't Caleb's face. It was this sort of orange shell.
So that's what I wanted to talk about, because how are you lighting it? Like, how do you light this character that isn't really there, and so much is going to be replaced? Do you have to change the way you light it all?
No, you light it like as if it's the real robot. And they go and use that lighting. There was one scene in particular, the confessional, where he sits, because, that was one of the things. In the back of the RV is these little, I don't know what you call that in English,
like ropes?
Yeah, the ropes that sort of are between spaces to keep, people use that stuff to keep flies out.
Like from the beads, the beaded.
That's right.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
And so Caleb was sitting behind those. And I said, but Scott, why don't we take those things out, man? It's like it's right in front of him. Like, it's going to be a nightmare. You're going to have to like rotor that stuff out bead by bead. He says, yeah, that's fine. That's what we're going to do. And when we were shooting it, I was like, oh man, I feel this is too dark. And we were in it. I was in it. And it was like, okay, well, I mean, this is probably the darkest moment in the movie, or at the same time, maybe hopeful. I don't know. Because the robot says, I think it's like, Finch, I believe in you, So that was quite hopeful. But it was so dark in there with Caleb. And I was like, Scott, I don't know if I want him that dark, to be honest. And then we looked at the finished movie the way he did it, and I was like, it looked great. It is dark, but I think it's just right. And I think they put a little eye light in his eyes, and that kind of made you connect a little bit easier with him. You can go really dark if you have that little bit of, ping in the eye, which I don't strive for all the time, but in those cases, it can be helpful.
I mean, if you're going to light the character's dark, I guess it would have been weird if you lit that moment really brightly, just because you couldn't necessarily see the robot so well. I mean, it's kind of supposed to be it's an inside of an RV.
Yeah. Sure.
It kind of is what it is, and you're going with that naturalistic look. Yeah. But it is fascinating to me that something like having that beaded wall, I guess, for lack of a better word, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's like when they have a bunch of beads hanging down, you kind of push them aside to get through. When you're looking at that and you're like, we could just take that out, like just get rid of it, and it makes the shot so much easier in post. It's to make the decision to leave it is a bold, inexpensive decision that really lends to Miguel's commitment to being real and grounded. Yeah, I mean, to that's a huge expense to do the visual effects like that.
Somebody is like sitting that there, like, and it's not like we put some green screen there or anything. Nothing. It's just shoot, and it's dark, and they got to find the edges, and that thing is is moving and there's motion blur in there. And maybe that helps actually. But yeah, I mean, that scene also, there is a scene where the first connection where the dog actually allows Jeff to be, he puts that wet towel on his forehead, and he comes in there. He's like, he doesn't know what to do, and he goes in there and that's another one where he's really in contact with Tom. He's touching him. He's there, and he puts his hand on there, and then the dog looks over to him like, am I going to bark? Am I going to let him do this or not? And then that's that little bit of trust that starts building.
Now, the other co-star in this film is the dog, which is something I want to talk to you about as well, because I've had a little bit of experience directing dogs and for commercials.
Right.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, they are unpredictable.
Yeah.
Even the most talented on-camera dogs are just unpredictable. For people that haven't had that experience at all, what have you found to be, the most kind of challenging part of filming animals?
I mean, funny enough, the first week it was and that was this particular dog. He was quite dark. He was quite hard to light. He was quite hard to get, and suddenly I'm talking about, oh my God, I'm going to have to put highlights on this dog. I'm going to have to really to give that dog emotion and for the audience to connect with this dog. The first couple of days in the bunker, it appeared, it was like, oh, Tom is fine there in the dark, but the dog kind of, I don't know, I think I need to light his dog a little bit more. I need to give him a little more fill, or I need to give him a little highlight. But he was an amazing performer. And a funny story about Seamus the dog, which is his real name, was a rescue dog. And they found his dog and they presented 3 dogs to Tom Hanks. And he picked that dog. He picked the dog.
It was one dog throughout the whole thing?
We had other dogs to kind of but our dog was so good, or Seamus was so good, I think he did 99% of the work. We had some stand-ins, other dogs that were, but Seamus was just so good. He was great around us. We would be in the RV. He would just hang out. He would just sit on the chair. There's some good pictures of him just hanging out. And he became like the RV, the pod became this, that's where it really became a small movie. It was just, you could only fit 8 people in there. It was like the sound guy or the boom guy. You had the operator, the first AC, there was me, the director, the actors, and then the dog trainer. Sorry, and the dog, of course, and the trainer. And it just became this, and Tom hung out with us. I'd be in the back sort of fiddling with lights because I do sort of playing around and moving stuff myself and screwing in bulbs. And Tom would be asleep there on the bed, just hanging out with us. And it was it became this little family. It was this little traveling circus. It was a really good experience. I mean, it was a tough movie to make. I think they probably all are. Some a little harder than others. But I definitely come away from this movie that I would work with these people again. And I think that's really important. The journey is equally as important as the end result.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, when you're working with Seamus, our dog actor here, are there accommodations that need to be made? Do they have special amount, like when you work with kids, there's only so many hours you can have them on set. Are there certain things like that with animals that restrict your normal working day?
I don't think so, actually. That's a good question.
No.
But I don't think so.
Well, I noticed, the reason I ask is because, I mean, we're doing commercials, so we're only 1 or 2 10, 12-hour days. Yeah. It's nowhere near a film. But what I noticed in this film is there's quite a few reaction shots where the dog there's nobody else around. It's just the dog. You're getting a lot of reactions. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, did they just bang out 20, 30 of these reactions with a second unit and just plop them in as necessary? Because it felt like there were times where you were filming the dog for a reaction that was sort of independent of the scene.
We did that sometimes, but there was even in prep, Miguel had an idea of I need another unit that's going to stay behind, shoot stuff with the robot, shoot stuff with the dog, And, there's always limitations. There's always budget limitations. There's practicality limitations. It's like, yeah, but the trainer and this camera crew there and this camera crew there, it's like, it just became another character and we just shot him like an actor, like he was there. So most of the time we just shot him, like, all right, we're done with Tom, we're done with Caleb, let's shoot the dog, let's shoot a few shots with him. We did do a few takes like where it was like, oh, it's a while ago now, but there was definitely maybe some moments, but we sort of made him part. The only thing you had to do around the dog, you sort of have to, stay quiet around the dog. Don't like try and feed him or don't try and, keep him focused on the trainer. But he was a lovely dog to be around. Yeah.
It sounds like you guys had a lot of fun. Just good vibes on set.
Yeah.
A great movie, and it all kind of came together really, really well. And of course, I encourage all of you guys to check it out. It's on Apple TV Plus. It's called Finch. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is night exteriors, of which you do quite a bit. And I'd like to just discuss maybe one of the night exterior scenes and how you achieved that. I know you did some day for night, but I'd like to talk about like actual true evening exteriors.
Yeah.
And how did you approach that? Especially maybe in the interiors of the van, there were quite a few night exteriors where you kind of had to find light anywhere you can.
I mean, it was an exterior, for example. I won't go back to the scene that sort of gives me, moments of
nightmares?
Sadness, nightmares. It was the scene with Tom by the fireplace, by the little campfire. And that's sort of lit by the Aurora Borealis,
Yeah.
And I wanted it to have, obviously I needed to see openness in that environment. I didn't want it to be too dark. So I had some ARRI 360Ss. They're the bigger sort of LED panels. I think we had 3 of them on a Condor that we sort of had to the right. And then we had the fireplace. And I had done this TV show called C, that we had done a lot of the fireplace sequences. We only used fire. And I showed this to Miguel and he was like, oh yeah, looks great. Let's do it. Just the fire. It's going to be great. Plus, of course, the 360s that had a slightly greenish color because of the Aurora Borealis. But of course, that night there was a lot of wind. It was outside, and I had to supplement it a little bit with something else. Because otherwise, when the flame was going down, it was constantly getting blown. It was kind of like on Tom's face. But again, it was sort of trying to be real about the night.
Well, I think it's interesting because you do have the fire, and you've got that the S360 up in the sky as well. Yeah. Was that just giving you general moonlight? Were you taking green from the Aurora Borealis, or were you taking some firelight?
No, general moonlight was kind of like sort of to have detail on the landscape and on the RV,
That's the hardest part. Whenever I talk about night exteriors with DPs, it's always the challenge of like, how realistic is this night going to be? Because night is dark. You can't see anything.
It's pitch
and that
black.
Isn't great. It's exactly. And that's not great for cinematography, especially when you're in an environment where there is no life. There's no cities. There's no lights anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just pure evening nothingness.
Yeah.
And you're also kind of in a situation where there's a lot of weather going on. I mean, that's kind of the premise of the film. There's a lot of issues, clouds going all over the place. So you don't really have like this beautiful, perfect, clean, clear night, except in this moment because the Aurora Borealis was visible and that was kind of the point of that moment. But the challenge is always, how do you have enough light that it's realistic, but not too much that it doesn't feel like night anymore?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the challenge of, particularly if you say, oh, I want to shoot in a naturalistic way. If you said, oh, we're making a big Hollywood movie, let's put like a bunch of machines in there and it all looks like it's great. But when you try and keep anything artificial, which I have to go back a little bit to the other scene, which is by the overpass, it's like it was also hard to hide machines. So now you're putting, big HMIs because you got to light the whole area and you're kind of front lighting it and you're trying to get some detail in there. You have to light so you have to go with the convention of moonlight. You have to you have to kind of use that. And you can go with soft light or you can go with harder light. But in this movie, like, yeah, there is nothing. There's no city. There's nothing. The luck I had was I ended up using quite a lot of, a few lightning strikes that gave me that extra detail because I decided to shoot them almost full silhouette under that overpass before it started raining. Same thing. Sometimes you're like, you know, it feels kind of right. Let's just do it. And then I said, Miguel, are you okay with this? Yeah, no, it's fine. Let's do it. And, you know, those are nice moments on set as well of like to kind of go for it. And not like, oh, well, no, I need to see them. Let's like push more light. And then it was the lightning strikes that would, you know, I would have the big lightning strikes in the back and then close the frame. I had a few smaller LED sky panels that would give the same thing. So I could raise them up a little bit and show detail. You don't have to see people all the time. You know?
I love that. I was talking to Ben Cutchins, who shot White Lotus. Yeah. And I don't know if did you see that series at all on HBO? Sure.
Yeah, it looks great.
There was I asked him about why even at night scenes when it seems like people are going to bed, there's still some sunlight outside. Like the sun is always kind of setting. It's in like a perpetual state of setting. Yeah. And I talked to him about the decision to do that. And it came down to something as simple as like, well, if the sun had set, you couldn't see anything. You can't see anything on the beach. It's hard to do a beach scene at night. Yeah. And it was just a funny thought because you're like, yeah, I guess you're right. Like there really is nothingness when you look out into the ocean at night. Yeah, for sure. So ever since that conversation, I've become fascinated with night exteriors. And I think you did a great job on those. And of course, the entire film, it looks awesome. And the story is it's a great, warm, nice little family kind of story. It is. Wrapped in a post-apocalyptic world. And somehow it all makes sense. Yeah. But it certainly does. The film is called Finch. It's on Apple TV Plus, and you guys should see it right now. You will absolutely love it. Jo Willems, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I'd love to have you back. You're a lot of fun to talk to.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Excellent. Where can people find you online?
I have a website, jowillems.com, and then I have some Instagram, Jo Willems ASC SBC.
Nice. And we'll put a link to both of those in the show notes. Jo Willems, thank you so much for being on the Go Creative Show.
Thank you.
Excellent. Now, all I need from you is an intro. So look right into the lens.
Yeah.
Your name, director of photography of Finch, and end it with, and end it with, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Okay. Let me write this down for a second. So my name,
name, title, film.
Yeah.
And this is the Go Creative Show.
Okay. Can I do it?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Jo Willems. I'm the cinematographer on Finch, and you're watching the Go Creative Show.
Great. One more time, and this is the Go Creative Show, because people they listen and they also watch.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Jo Willems. I'm the cinematographer on Finch, and you're watching that's not it, right? This is the Go
Creative Show. Yep. I know, it's not a natural thing to say, but it helps.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jo Willems. I'm the DP on, all right, let me do cinematographer.
All right, I want to thank Jo Willems, director of photography of Finch on Apple TV Plus, for coming on the show and talking to us today. I learned a lot. I hope you guys did too. And please go check out the movie. It's really, really great. You guys will love it. It looks awesome. And now that you know how it was filmed, it's going to make it even more interesting to watch. I also want to thank our producer, Connor Crosby, over at ignitionvisuals.com. And of course, encourage you all to follow us on your favorite podcast app. Click subscribe so you never miss an episode. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Also hit subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. And if you want to see what's going on with me, you can find me at Ben Consoli, at BenConsoli. For those of you that don't know, I own a production company here in Boston. I'm a director and I'm also a producer too. So the stuff that I'm working on, I post on my Instagram all the time. So if you want to see what I'm doing, check it out there. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next week on another episode of The Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.